Hello, everyone. Welcome to Study Sunday. Today we're with Frank Chapman. Frank is a mentor to
Hello,
myself and
everyone.
many
Welcome
others
to Study Sunday.
organizing
Today,
in Chicago and around the country. Frank, you can actually read about him in his book, The Damned Don't Cry. This is his autobiography that came out in 2019. Um, Frank was a political prisoner in the 60s and 70s and started organizing in prison. Um, and has been organizing, fighting for liberation of, exploited and oppressed people ever since. So the book that we're talking about right now is Frank's newest book, which came out a couple weeks ago, Marxist-Leninist Perspectives on Black Liberation and Socialism. Um, and this book, nearly halfway through it. It has so much history, so much theory, so much knowledge. So I'm here to give you some of that knowledge and tell you about the core meaning of this book and why you should read it, why it's important in this historical moment to understand Black liberation and socialism. I'm here to tell you all of these things is Frank Chapman.
thank you, Kobi. Um, Good afternoon, comrades, um, and happy Valentine's Day to you. In the spirit of Che Guevara, who said, talks about revolution and love. But I want to talk about my book. This is kind of a special moment for me as the author of the book. So I'm so glad to see you here. I'm deeply honored to be here on behalf of Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which is the publisher of my book. And I just want to talk, in a very relaxed manner uh, about the book. Um, the book it's not that long. It's only about 190 pages, but it's very compact. It's got a lot of information in it, and so I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. Um, but it took me about 10 years to write it, and the reason why it took me so long to write it is because I'm in the movement. I've been busy doing the things that Kobi just talked about when he introduced me. Been involved in the struggle of the Black Liberation Movement, and mainly in the mass movement to defend the Black Liberation Movement. You know, so that's why it took so long. But here it is. It's finally done. So let's talk about the book itself. Um, it's a it's unique in the sense that I think at least I can't remember ever reading a book that really traced out the historical development in terms of the relationship between the Black Liberation Movement and socialism, going back to the 19th century. You know, going back to the birth of the communist movement in 1848. Uh, so it does that, and in the introduction, uh, let me just read something from the introduction that tunes you into what the thesis is of the book. In the introduction, there's a quote from the Communist International, which was formed in the 1920s. It says the Communist International breaks once and for all with the traditions of the Second International, which in reality only recognize the white race. The task of the Communist International is to emancipate the workers of the whole world. In its ranks are fraternally united men of all colors, white, yellow, and black. the toilers of the entire world. And that was kind of a reaffirmation of the final words of the Communist Manifesto. Workers of the world, unite, you have nothing to lose or your change. They just go into a little bit more details about what they talk about when they're talking about the workers of the world. They're including the colonially and nationally oppressed. And so I start off with that quote because what the book, what the theme of the book is that from the very beginning, Marxism took up the united with the struggle of people who were enslaved and colonized from the very beginning. So when he says workers of the world unite, it was not understood by a lot of people, particularly in Europe, that he included in that concept people who were enslaved in the colonies and so on. So so we start off by showing that Marxism was the first to put out the expression, slavery in the white skin cannot be free if it is branded and sold in the black skin. And so what does that mean? That means that the working class, in order to move forward as a class, has to be for the abolishment of slavery. You know, so to be a communist was to be an abolitionist in the true sense of the word. You know, abolishing all forms of slavery, both for chattel slavery and wage slavery. And he shows that the relationship between these two slaveries is that, in Capital, for example, he talks about how wage slavery, how chattel slavery was a pedestal on which wage slavery stood. You know, in other words, because a white worker could enter into the marketplace and sell his labor as a free worker, that made him better somehow than a slave who was bought and sold like property that they were, you know, so Marx saw a need to unite these two struggles, and that the struggle against slavery had to be a precondition for the emancipation of the working class as a whole. And so that's the theme. And in setting forth that theme in the early chapters of the book, what are we saying? We're saying that the revolutionary essence of Marxism, part of the revolutionary essence of Marxism, is addressing the centrality of the struggle against slavery and colonialism. That's part of its revolutionary essence, and that got lost. Because you know, towards the death of, actually towards the demise of the First International, which we'll talk about in the book also, it got lost because the Second International and the Social Democratic movement that started on the basis of that, they abandoned this question. They stepped away from it. And what we maintain in this book is that by doing that, they betrayed Marxism, you know. And so so the quote that I read from you was from the Communist International. So after the Russian Revolution, the Communist International was formed. They brought that back into Marxism because it's part of the revolutionary essence. So Marxism, it's interesting that the Marxists who became revisionists and reformers during the latter part of the 19th century, like Bernstein and others, that they rejected this question. And so what did they replace it with? They replaced it with national chauvinism. They replaced it with the idea that socialism was for the white workers to liberate the black workers. That don't worry about slavery. That we'll deal with slavery once we liberate the white workers. That was the first aspect of it. Then after slavery was in fact abolished and so on, and imperialism started to come on the scene, these same revisionists or people of that same ilk, they begin to identify with the interests of the imperialists. So they were telling workers to go to war and fight for the recolonization of the world. So that's how treacherous and their betrayal became to the cause of the working class movement. So that's the theme. Now, you know, the book has got 10 chapters in it, and I just want to. When I was in prison, you know, I learned how to read a book in 3 ways. You know, I would read it structurally, you know, how it's put together, go through the skeleton of it, and then I would read it. I would do a structural analysis and come to terms with the book, you know, and then I would finally do an interpretive reading of the book, you know. So I'm not saying that you have to do that, you know, but those were my methods when I was in prison, and I got a lot of books read that way. So in terms of structure, the book is broke down into 10 chapters, and the first chapter is on capitalism, slavery, and revolution. The second chapter is on Black Reconstruction and the unfinished business of the bourgeois revolution of 1776. The third chapter is Prelude to U.S. imperialism. The fourth chapter is Jim Crow and the moribund stage of capitalism. The fifth chapter is Monopoly Capitalists' attempts to harness the Black Liberation movement. And then the sixth chapter is on the color line and the colonial problem, World War, and the Bolshevik Revolution. And the 7 chapters on the contributions of Black revolutionaries to the Communist International are deeply rooted in the historic struggle for Black liberation. And the 8 chapters, Black liberation and the class struggle during the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, and World War II. The 9th chapter is the question of Black liberation and the struggle against imperialism, post-World War II era. And the 10th chapter, the final chapter, is seeing the present in the candid light of the past. And then we do an epilogue in which we talk about how do we apply these lessons of history to our current situation. So that's the structure of the book, you know. So in coming to terms with the book, you're going to learn about the national question as seen by communists, and we're going to give you some insight and knowledge about that based on the actual documents that we studied from the Communist International. You're going to see how the how based on the party's position on the national question, that the movement between the communists in the United States and the Black Liberation movement joined together in the fight for workers' rights, for socialism, and for Black liberation. This happened in a very profound way during the 30s. Well, you know, it started before the 30s. It started in the 19th century, but it reached that level of maturity in the 30s because it was only after the Bolshevik Revolution that we really had acquired a scientific understanding of the national question. So so we show how these particular policies on the part of the Communist Party led to a very powerful development of a movement that really so shook this country in the 30s until it laid the foundation for the emergence of other movements like the civil rights movement of the 60s, you know, which paved the way for the Black Liberation movement that we're in today. So we follow this thread of development throughout the entire book with lots of information and whatnot. You know, we get into a lot of details with how the theory of the national question was developed. You know, how the capitalists have tried to undermine that theory and the practice of the Communist Party. You know, we talk about all of that. You know, so I want to hear from you guys. You know, I want to get questions that you might have about the book, and those of you who have already started reading it, I really would love to hear from you about it. So you know, we're not done, but I'm done with this part. So I like to ask our whoever is you know running this program to open it up for questions.
Yeah. So the first question, and yeah, thank you, Frank, for that talk and for this book as well. Like I said, I'm almost halfway through it, and you know, I'm learning a lot. The first question is, what is the national question?
What is the national question?
Yeah.
Well, the national question is that under colonialism and imperialism, you know, people were forged into nations and oppressed as nations. That means that within a given nation, you know, let's take Black people for example. Our nation was formed, you know, with chains and whips and guns and swords, you know, and so we developed our national consciousness and our existence as a nation, you know, under slavery and semi-colonial bondage, and so our demands, even back during the time of slavery, was that we be given our freedom as a people, as a nation, and that means the right to determine our own political destiny. That the capitalists and the imperialists grant us that right, and that's what the struggle for national liberation is all about. It's about from getting under the heel of the colonialists and the imperialists and determining your own political development. Now, nations, you know, consist of classes. So there would be, you know, some nations develop their own national bourgeoisie. In the Black nation in the United States, we developed our own bourgeoisie. That's part of the way capitalism develops. You know, it ushers in a definite class struggle in terms of the nation. So when we talk about a nation, we're not just talking about the working class. We're also talking about petty bourgeoisie and maybe a very small but sometimes significant bourgeoisie. So when we talk about the liberation of a nation, we're talking about all of those classes joining together in the demand, uniting and fighting together in the demand for their national liberation. That's what happened in Africa during the period of decolonization, particularly after World War II. You know, and that's what happened in China during the end of World War II, and that's what's happening in the Philippines right now. You know, Palestine and other places. So when people fight for their national liberation, this is what they're fighting for: to get out from under the brutal, exploitative rule of the colonialists and the imperialists.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question, was there an event that inspired you but didn't make it into either one of your books?
I didn't get the question.
Was there an event that inspired you but didn't make it into either one of your books? So like an event that meant a lot to you but that you haven't written about yet.
Was there some particular event that inspired me?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if the person
to write this book. Is that what you're saying?
Or, I'm actually not sure.
Well, there was a number of events, but the main thing that inspired me to write it is that Black people are nationally oppressed, and I wanted to write a book about how we've been dealing with that historically. But I also wanted to write a book about how our principal allies, particularly the Communist Party and communists, have assisted us in that struggle.
Okay. I mean, if the I feel like whoever wrote that question can probably clarify it. So we're just gonna move on. So the third question, do you think the Democrats have tried to co-opt the George Floyd uprising?
Do I feel like what?
Like the Democrats have tried to co-opt the George Floyd uprising.
Have tried to call it off?
Co-opt.
Oh, yeah. Well, they can't co-opt it, but yeah, of course. That's just a straight up answer. Yeah, the Democrats, we're in a very, and I talk about this in the epilogue of my book, we're in a very serious moment of history here. And that is that the George Floyd uprising in 2020, where you had 26 million people, rising up in all 50 states of the United States, it set a new stage for our struggle. A new stage for our struggle. It happened during the pandemic, when people were already in great suffering, and people were dying. So it set a new stage for our struggle. And the main message that it sent to the ruling class is that, we're not taking this anymore. We're at the end of this. We want some basic systemic changes to happen in this country, and we want them to happen right the fuck now. That was the manifesto coming from the streets, in 2020. And so, of course, the Democrats are going to try to put a cap on that, because they're part of the ruling class, and that's what they do. So what we should continue to do is to continue to get in the streets, continue to struggle, continue to organize, continue to fight back, so as to get our demands addressed. And who's ever in power, Democrats or Republicans, we must do this to get our demands addressed. And so this is a movement that we should not allow and that cannot be co-opted. Because we are going to fight until we get our freedom. That's what we're saying here.
Ashe. So the next question, what are some of the differences in the fight for liberation for oppressed nationality people living within the national territory and outside of it?
You say the differences?
Yeah.
Well, the main difference is that we're in the belly of the beast, and our struggle is very important and very crucial to the struggles of other peoples. We talk about that in here too, in the book, particularly in the chapter dealing with the rise of imperialism and World War and so on. We're in the belly of the beast, and we have to take very seriously the solidarity that we have with other nationally oppressed people, colonized people, in both within in the United States and outside the United States. We have unconditional solidarity with the Chicano nation in this country, with the indigenous people, with the Puerto Rican people, because we're all fighting for national liberation and we're all fighting against the same enemy. And we're not saying that our fight is more important, but we're saying our fight is very strategic and very critical to the victory of everybody, because it is our duty and our responsibility to stop the imperialist aggressions and genocide perpetrated against people in the Philippines, the people in Africa and Asia. That's our responsibility. Our responsibility to stop the imperialists from trying to put a chokehold on Cuba. That's our responsibility. We have a very special responsibility because we're inside the beast. And we have to struggle like that, but which means that at all times we should maintain, to the best of our ability, our capacity and resources, solidarity with the national liberation movements throughout the world.
Thank you. So the next question, does the Black nation still exist in the Black Belt South? And to what extent do you feel that Comrade Harry Haywood's Black Belt thesis holds up in our present material conditions? Oh yeah, the question is reiterated. So does the Black Belt nation still exist? And how, if at all, have the material conditions changed since Harry Haywood wrote about it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Excellent question. Yes, the Black Belt nation still does exist. That's what this book is about in detailed particularity. Back during the time when Harry Haywood wrote the Black nation in the South is where 80% of the Black people of the country, almost 80% of the Black people of the country lived. That's not true today. Today it's about 57%. But we still have the same Black Belt. Let me just give you an example. I'll read from the book. Okay, let me give you the 10 states with the largest Black populations, and this is the District of Columbia, which is 50% black, Mississippi 37% black, Louisiana 32% black, Georgia 30% black, Maryland 29% black, South Carolina 27%, 27.9% black, Alabama 26.2% black, North Carolina 21.5% black, Delaware 21.4% black, and Virginia 19.4% black. Now, the South has the largest percentage of black people, 57%, according to the 2010 U.S. Census, and the Black Belt region of the South has the largest concentration of black people. This Black Belt region and its boundaries is a band through the center of the Deep South, but also stretching as far north as Delaware and as far west as East Texas. The political use of the term Black Belt designates the counties where the black population constitutes a majority. From the 1940s to the present, the Black Belt comprises about 200 counties, forming a crescent from Virginia to Texas. The U.S. Census report in 2000 identified 96 counties in the United States with black populations of more than 50%. 95 of the counties are located across the coastal lowland, south in a loose arc related to the traditional Black Belt region embracing the Mississippi Delta. Okay, so in 2000, the United States Department of Agriculture proposed creating a federal regional commission similar to the Appalachian Regional Commission to address the social economic problems of the Black Belt. And what precisely are those problems? So this answers the other part of the question. Low educational attainment, poor health care, high infant mortality rates, substandard housing, massive unemployment, and high crime rates. Historically, this region has experienced lack of economic development. This backwardness proportionally affects black people and the working poor throughout, therefore affecting all who live in this region. So the South continues to be the most backward section of the country, economically and politically speaking, because it is the country, it is that part of the country which carries out the most brutal, racist, and nationalist oppression of black people. It's not that way by incident, or coincident. It's that way by design. And so fundamentally, in terms of the oppression of the black nation, there hasn't been a lot of great progressive changes in the South. There's been some, because the civil rights movement was focused mainly in the South, and so there's been some changes, and there will continue to be some. But we also know that this is the arena of fierce struggles, as was brought out in the recent elections with regard to Georgia and other places, So yeah, we still exist as an oppressed nation, and our geographical and physical location is still in the South.
Thank you. So the next question, very, very simply worded. How does the trade union movement fit into this?
Well, how does what happen now?
How does the trade union movement fit into this?
Oh, very important. Now, we also deal with that in the book. We talk about the relationship between black people and the labor movement throughout the history of this country, And so, generally speaking, I spoke to it earlier when I quoted Karl Marx about, labor if labor in the black skin is sold and branded, it can't be free in the white skin. That's the fundamental relationship. So, bringing that into the present moment, so long as black people and black workers are super exploited and oppressed, that's an albatross around the neck of the whole entire working class. Under capitalism, you have class exploitation. You know, not race exploitation, class exploitation based on the mode of capitalist production. You know, classes are determined by the relationship you have to the means of production. So black people are what? They're 90% working class, you know? And so now everything that happens to us affects the class as a whole. And the main block to class consciousness in this country is that this situation is allowed to exist. And so it becomes vital to the interest of the working class, white, black, brown, you know, multi-gendered. It becomes critical that the working class unite and fight back across the color line, and that the working class unite and fight back with ending racist discrimination and national oppression on the front of its agenda, not on the back. You know, that without the labor movement, we can't win, and without the Black Liberation movement, we can't win. And the national liberation movements, you know, of other oppressed nationalities, such as the Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, etc. So we have to unite and fight back, because as long as this type of oppression is allowed to exist with regard to black folks and brown folks, the working class cannot move forward in a revolutionary way, you know. And so, in order to bring that about, we must fight together. So, in practice, and you're going to see a lot of this practice in this book, you know, where the working class and the national liberation movements have united, we have made the greatest amount of social progress in practice, you know. And so that's a proven fact. And so in order for us to have a healthy, vibrant, militant, and aggressive revolutionary movement, we're going to have to unite with the working class, and the working class is going to have to unite with us. You know, there has to be unity along these lines, because as long as labor is being super exploited and oppressed in a black skin, it can't free itself in a white skin.
Right on. So the next question is the oppression of LGBTQ people, which is rooted in colonialist Christian attitudes, related to the national question, or is it fundamentally different?
No, it's related to the national question. Because LGBTQ people belong to nations and they belong to classes, you know. So absolutely. And you know, the LGBTQ people who are black know this. They know this from the den of experience. They know that they're severely victimized and exploited by racist attitudes and racist practices, and they know that as part of an oppressed nation, you know, they're tripled and doubled down on. So yeah, they are part of the national question, absolutely.
Thank you. So the next question, Comrade Chapman, based on your experience, how might allies of colonized nationalities best use the information in your book to organize practical applications in the pursuit of revolution? And someone else phrased that question kind of differently. What's the best way for non-Black allies to support anti-colonialism and Black liberation?
Okay. Well, the first thing we do right is when we start to fight. So by getting involved in the movement, you know, and particularly the movement I'm speaking on behalf of here today, the Freedom Socialist Organization, you know, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and also the movement. You know, if I guess that they're saying if you're white, what do you do? Is that what I'm hearing here? Well, you join us. It's just that simple. You know, I'm not going to make it complicated. You join us, and you know, if you're in the trade union movement, you know, that's good, but that's not good enough. You know, if you're in a movement in your neighborhood to fight for human rights and economic rights, fight against gentrification and so forth and so on, that's good, but that's not good enough. You know, if you are if you're a student on the campus and you're fighting for you know, improve your educational opportunities and whatnot, that's not good enough. You know, you have to get involved in our movement, which is a revolutionary movement, which means we are uniting to fight to overturn all of these things that oppress us all, you know, and we can't do that by just staying in our various little categories and corners of the struggle. You know, we have to become united as one unified force, and we can do that through the socialist movement. We can do that through the communist movement. We can do that through Freedom Road Socialist Organization. So you should become a part of us.
That's right. Join Freedom Road, everybody. So there's just a few more questions left. The next one, in several national liberation struggles, the national bourgeoisie was deemed to have revolutionary potential, at least for a time. Do you think the Black national bourgeoisie has a revolutionary role?
Yeah, like the question almost answered itself. Yeah, for a time. But the what I really think and what I really push in the book, well, I'm not gonna qualify it like that. Yeah, that's true for a time, as the person said. But what's really going to carry it through, what's really going to maintain the consistency of the revolutionary movement and you know, of the revolutionary character of the national liberation movement is the role of the working class. See, you know, a movement can be nationalist in form. An anti-colonial movement or anti-imperialist movement can be nationalist in form. But in order to be revolutionary in content, the workers have to play a leading role. It can be nationalist in form, but in order to have a revolutionary content, the workers have to play a leading role. Have to play a leading role. This is not. This is historically demonstrated, and if that doesn't happen, you know, then it opens up the door for counter-revolution, and it opens up the door for our movement being set back. You know, so we have to fight. We as communists, we have to fight for the leading role of the working class in national liberation struggles, and that especially includes the Black Liberation movement. Like I said, we're 90-some% working class. So yeah, we should be in the leadership. Doesn't mean that we won't work with the national bourgeoisie.
That's right. So the next question, the book is about the communist movement taking up the struggle for Black liberation, but in Chicago, the CPAC campaign that you have been the main leader of has brought about a strategic alliance between progressive labor unions and the Black liberation movement. The principles you articulate that the working class socialist movement needs to support the demands of the Black liberation movement. how does that relate to the strategic alliance around demands like CPAC?
Very, very good question. Excellent question. CPAC, let's talk about that first, which is an all-elected civilian police accountability council, is really about the struggle for community control of the police. And there's a lot of confusion around that that's deliberately projected into our movement. It doesn't come from us, it comes from the enemy. So let's try to clear some of that up. The struggle for community control of the police is about self-determination. We're talking about us having control over who polices our communities and how our communities are policed. That demand coming out of an oppressed nation is about self-determination. And if you look at the history of Black people, going all the way back to Marcus Garvey, well, actually going all the way back to Black Reconstruction after the Civil War, that has always been our demand. We've always demanded that. Because for a brief moment of history during the Reconstruction era, we had community control of the police. When the Ku Klux Klan and the ex-Confederate soldiers and whatnot overthrew Black Reconstruction, they put us under their policing, you know. So we went from our policing, which was defending our revolutionary gains that were made in 1867, to the policing that was imposed upon us by racist terrorists who overthrew our Reconstruction governments. So this has been a bone of contention, you know, in our movement since then. And so you can't name a period in our history where you're going back to the Garvey movement, the anti-lynching period when Ida B. Wells and them were fighting for an anti-lynching bill, coming all the way up to the civil rights movement, to the 60s with the Panthers, and all the way up to now. We've always fought for community control of the police because the police have always been the main block in the road in our struggles. Whenever we have rose up against our oppressors, they have been there to put us down. You know, that's clear. So this is a very important demand and a vital demand of the Black Liberation Movement, and also other national liberation movements, such as the Chicano Liberation Movement. Now, communists historically, and we point this out in the book, have stood beside us in making these demands. But that's not only in the 30s, that's not only in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, that's today. Communists are still standing beside us in making those demands. You know, they're still a part of our movement. That's what Freedom Road Socialist Organization is. You know, still a part of our movement, still fighting with us in making those demands, because communists understand the importance of these demands, that we need the organizing space in the Black community to fight fully, more fully and more comprehensively for Black liberation. And that we get that space by dealing with the police. We got to fight the police. We got to fight for community control of the police. We can't ignore that. We can't act like they're not there. They are there. They're murdering us. They're killing us. They're occupying our communities. We have to deal with this. If we don't deal with this, then we are allowing the repression to continue. And we're not going to allow it to continue. We're going to deal with it. You know, and our communist comrades are going to work with us on this. Well, our communist comrades includes me. are going to work with us on this, you know, like we've always done throughout history. And that's in the book too.
Thank you again. So the last question for today. Some are only familiar with anarchist, eclectic, or quote-unquote non-ideological reforms in Black activism today. How do you see the status of the Black liberation movement to continue or reclaim socialist and communist orientation?
Well, I see it as very promising, and I see that as our future. You know, as I try to make clear in the book, in the epilogue of the book, I try to make that very clear. These other political tendencies that you spoke to, anarchism and whatnot, they've always existed in the movement. They've always existed in the movement. We fight for the broadest possible unity between the oppressed against the oppressor. As Mao Zedong once said, we're about uniting the many against the few. So we can't get caught up in sectarian fights and disputes and whatnot to the neglect of our main task, and that is to unite the many against the few. To the extent that we mobilize and organize and build a truly people's movement rooted in the defense of democracy and rooted in the fight for socialism, to the extent that we do that, we will move past these other things. We will these waste materials that are clinging to the revolutionary movement will be defecated. We'll shut them out. As our movement becomes more healthy and stronger and more vigorous. So I'm not worried about them stopping us. I don't see them as a huge threat as long as we stick to our principles. And that is, as long as we continue to organize the many against the few, as long as we take from the masses and get back to the masses, we're going to be all right.
I know that's right. So that is the last question. I think we're coming up on the end of this program. So thank you everyone for being with us. Of course, thank you, Frank, for writing this book, for doing all the work that you do, for educating people, and for being here today. Do you have any like last minute comments that you want to make?
Yeah, I want to read just another little brief thing from the epilogue. And this is brief. We believe. I can't read nothing if I can't see it. Okay. All right. We believe that now we stand. This part of the epilogue is entitled "The End for Then, a New Beginning for Now." We believe that now we stand in the rosy dawn of a new movement to finally finish the unfinished revolution that was the Civil War of 1861. Since the overthrow of Reconstruction, that is, the ending by violence and terror, the revolutionary gains of the Civil War, there is a whole other history of alliances and compromises between the old former slaveholding South and the high finance Northern capitalists to continue the oppression and super exploitation of Black people. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, abolishing slavery, granting citizenship as a birthright, equal protection of rights, and the right to vote were kept on paper, but not fully enforced even to this day. This is not 1861. This is 2021. but we live in the shadow of the unfinished revolution started by the last Civil War. To go forward, we believe Black people, united with class-conscious workers and Marxist-Leninists, must muster the masses, firmly and unequivocally putting forth an agenda for Black and brown liberation and a class struggle agenda for the hundreds of millions of workers who are dying and suffering from this pandemic health crisis and economic devastation, leaving in its wake millions unemployed, stuck in dire poverty. So that's what our fight for the future looks like. And the future belongs to those who fight for it.
That's right. So thank you so much once again. And yeah, join FRSO. Come fight with us. The future belongs to us because we are willing to fight for it. All power to the people. And buy Frank's book. Buy 2 copies so you can borrow them out to people because you know they won't return them. Once again, thank you everyone for being here. And I think that is the end of this program. Join us again next week. We'll be doing Study Sunday. I'll be doing Study Sunday actually. Yeah. Thank you everybody so much.